Welcome to this introductory video for Falcon 2026, and this tutorial is going to be geared for those who may have just purchased the application and you're struggling to find your way around and figure out how to make use of all the various oscillators and effects and understand the structure and layout of this amazing synth sampler beast. So when we first launch Falcon, we're going to see this getting started splash screen here. Now to the left hand side we can see recent patches that have been opened, and then over on the right hand side we can see some templates. These are pretty much created by UVI to help jumpstart you into working with sound. You could just take a look at these, you'll see the descriptions, and then at the very bottom we can click on the new empty project. If we prefer not to see the splash screen, then we can deselect this box here, and then once we reopen Falcon we'll no longer see this window here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the new empty project, and to begin with we're just going to take 120 seconds to quickly create a patch from scratch, just to give you guys who are just getting started with this to see what the workflow is going to look like and how quickly you can go about creating some cool sounds. So I may not say much while I'm going through this process, but we'll go ahead and clear out the patch when we're finished and then take a look at the layout, oscillators, effects again, and cover everything that you need to know about how Falcon functions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and work on creating a patch. I'm going to come down to the mapping area here, click on this hamburger button, and come to the create key group, and we're going to create a synth patch. So I'm going to choose the synth template. And for this template, we start off with an analog oscillator here, a basic analog oscillator. So we've got our sine wave. I'm going to go ahead and change this over to a saw. Let's take the voices up. I'm just going to hover and use my mouse wheel. We'll take that up to say 3. Let's make this stereo. And we'll get some stereo spread. Let's detune a little bit. Okay, let's take the attack up. We've got our envelope down at the bottom. Take our release time up. Now I'd like to add a filter to that, and I'm going to add that to the key group section. Anything that we add to the key groups is going to be applied per note. Let's click on the plus for effects, and we've got our filters here. Let's just add the VCF dual. And let's come up to our program section, and I'm going to add a delay. I like this dark little room preset. And let's go ahead and add some reverb to this. Their IR verb is one of the best sounding reverbs I have heard. We do have to dig down a little bit, but it's worth it. We'll go with this ETM 140 long. Let's put a maximizer on here. So we've got this easily created in just a minute, but let's come back over to the reverb because I just want to show how awesome these presets that they have are within here. So we can come to the sound design. Let's check some of these out. Now using the left and right arrow, I can then navigate within these presets there. Now, what if we'd like to add some modulation to the cutoff of our filter here? So I can right click and let's come to add modulation. And I'm just going to come down to the bottom for the key group and we'll add that there. We'll choose a LFO. Okay, we can adjust the frequency here. Its depth. Now we can control the polyphony up here, so right now we're allowing 16 voices to come through, but I could take that down to 1. Okay, so in a fairly short amount of time, we can really come up with something that sounds really cool. But now we're just going to go ahead and clear out this instrument and we're going to take a look at the layout. So up at the top, we have this hamburger button. I can click on this, and then here we have clear multi. So I'll just select that. And now we're starting over from scratch here. So now let's get a handle on the interface. So starting up at the top, we just saw this hamburger button where we can load multi, recent multis, save, clear, add new programs, recent programs, and here we have templates. This is what we saw on that splash screen at the very beginning when we loaded our Falcon. These can help you get started quickly in different types of patches. We can then make use of some save options here. We have undo, redo, history for our undo and redo. Let's come back up to the top. We can load and save UI snapshots. Here we have preferences, so there may be some useful things that you'll want to take a look at here. We start off on the general tab, then we have a streaming option, managing our sound banks, and some other options that you may find useful. Let's go ahead and close that out. Now next to this button for our preferences, we have our undo and redo, and then here we can access a browser here where we can navigate through our collections of soundware and presets. We can then hide that by clicking again. Now here we have these two buttons. These are going to show and hide our side panels here. So clicking on these will make these go away or bring them back. Main is going to be our main work area, and we have tabs up at the top for that main section. We'll come back to that in a second. We can also switch over to a mixer view. If we have multiple parts within this, we can have multiple instruments contained within this one instance of Falcon. We can perform some mixing actions here. Then we have a performance area here where we can manage multiple parts at a time and adjust things like their level, their panning, their output, and the MIDI channel that things are being received on, mute and solo, the keyboard range, velocity range, and some other things here. Now let's come back to the main section. Over here we have tempo. We can tap in a tempo. We can sync with this metronome here to the tempo within our DAW. Play, stop, master tuning for our entire device. And then we have our program audio, or the main level control for this instance of Falcon. Now within the main area here, while we're on main, we can see at the top we have an info view. So when we're working with presets from the soundware, we're going to have controls that we can make use of to adjust our patches. The edit is where we can really go in and create our own patches or tweak some of the soundware presets that we may be using. We have an effects section here where we can show all of our effects that are being used and then manage those and adjust their parameters here if we'd like. We have a section for our events where we can manage all of those. And for all of our modulation, we can view everything here. And then we have a section for our mappers. but we'll come back to the edit page again. Now, I really want to take some time to talk about what's going on here and the structure and architecture of this edit area, because most of us know what oscillators are, we know what filters are, and LFOs and things like that. But how they work and how we can manage them and structure them within Falcon, I think is what throws a lot of people off here. So let's go ahead and click on this disclosure arrow to collapse our program. We'll click on this for our key groups and collapse that here, our oscillators. And then down at the bottom, we have our mapping and modulation sections. Now, the first thing to know is that we can manage what is shown here by clicking on these icons at the top. So this top one is going to be for our program section. You can see that these icons match here. So if I click on this, that's going to hide our program section. This is going to be our layers section. Our key groups is here. This is going to be our oscillator section. This is our mapping. And then this is our modulators. So we can show and hide whatever we'd like to by clicking on these icons here. Let's bring back our program. Well, we'll bring back all of these. Now, all of our sections are back, and then we have these disclosure errors. So if I click on this, we then can see the parameters for our program section, and we can determine what's being shown here with these icons on the right-hand side here. So if I click on this, this is going to hide our parameters. So I'll click on that. We can see these parameters are now hidden. We then have our effects, event, and mod. Effects, event, and mod. Now we also have this section for our mappers, which was already not shown, but we can toggle the view for all of these depending on what we'd like to see or don't want to see, and whatever we set here will be remembered when we load Falcon the next time. We'll go ahead and collapse that program section. Let's come to the layer section and expand that out. Now we have these same controls that will allow us to choose what we want to see here. Again, this is for our parameters. For our effects, you see we have event and mod. We can hide those like so. So a lot of flexibility in tailoring what we're seeing. We'll come down to our key group section. Again, we have parameters, which we can hide, our effects, and our mods. We'll go ahead and collapse that, and now we have our oscillator section, and we can show and hide its parameters like so. Now, moving down to the bottom here is our mapping, and this is where we're going to add and manage our key groups. So here we have a couple of options where we can highlight played key groups, and this is our MIDI select. We may come back to this in just a second. We'll collapse that. Then down at the bottom, we have our modulator section, and then here we can show and hide our modulation editor. Let's go ahead and collapse that. Now coming back to this side panel on the left here, we have several tabs, and then the furthest one on the left here is going to be our parts. So as I mentioned, this is a multi-timbral instrument, so we can have multiple parts or multiple instruments, multiple presets. Those will be shown here, and we can manage things like their level, their panning, their outputs, and we'll see the preset name listed here. We can choose the MIDI channel that information is being received on for it. We can mute and solo. Moving on, we have our tree view. This is going to allow us to quickly get to different sections and manage those within our patches that we're working on. And then we have a list view where we can further manage our presets and what's going on. And we'll just come back to the parts for now. Over on the right-hand side, we have this file browser. So up at the very top, we have devices. If I open this up, then we can navigate our system directory. Then we have places, and we can save favorite places within our directory. So here, I've got my personal sample library that I've added. I can click on the disclosure arrow. Now, for instance, if I wanted the movie samples to show up in the places list, I can right-click on it and then add that to the favorite places. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and then we can see that that's now added for quick access. If I right-click this, then we can remove that from the favorite places like so. All right, and then here we have our sound banks, and then we can click on this top one here. We can see all of the different categories, and if I click on this ambient, then we can access the patches. Clicking once, we can hear those auditioned. Let's go ahead and collapse that. I can come down to the Falcon factory here, expand that out. Clicking again, we collapse. Model D. This is a Mellotron, all of its presets, and then Prime 8. This is an 808 emulation here. So toggling by clicking once, we can show and hide the presets for each of these categories. Now next we have this magnifying glass where we can show our library and search through here. We'll come back to that. Then the next one we have our oscillator browser, our effects, where we can access by categories and drag these into our edit view. We have multi-effects, which are going to be a chain of effects. So if I come to guitar and acoustic, then we can drag these in. These will be a chain of multiple effects that we can apply pretty quickly to our patches. And then here we've got our event processor browser. And then here we have our modulations or modulators. Well, let's come back to our file browser. And we'll come back to our folder icon here so we can have a large view of all of our soundware here. We can see everything listed here. We have a search field up at the top, so I can click and then type in bass. And then everything that is tagged with bass is going to show over here. If I click once, we can then audition. Now, if I wanted to load one of these, I could just double click and that's going to load up. If I come to the info view, then we can see where we can make use of these macros to manage this sound. And let's go ahead and click on this folder icon again. We can clear out our search by clicking on the X here. If we'd like to access our favorites, then we can click on the star and then everything that we've favorited will show up here. We can also make use of the tags here. So if we'd like to search for synths, then we can click on that. If we'd like a lead, then we can click here. And then everything that's a lead is going to be populated in this field here. To clear that out, we can toggle that off, or we can come up to the top where we have synth and just click on the X here. Now if I wanted to choose a preset from my Model D, then I can just click once on that and we can see all of the presets for it here. Let's go ahead and double click on this romantic preset here. That's going to load up. Now once that's loaded, okay, so you get the idea here. Now let's go ahead and clear this out. We'll come up to the hamburger button and clear this multi. And let's take a look at creating our own patches. So for that, we'll click on the Edit tab. Again, we are on Main here. Now let's come down to the Mapping section here. And this is where we can add and manage our key groups. So I'm going to click on this button here. We can come up to the top and we have Create Key Group. So if we'd like to work with audio samples and the samplers that are contained within Falcon, we can choose Sample Template. Notice we do have a keyboard shortcut here, Control, Shift, and N. If we'd like to work with a synth template, then we can do Control and N. We also have some user templates. So you can create any sort of synth that you want. If you wanted a synth with 2 analog oscillators and a grain oscillator, we could create that with the filters that we want, and then we can save that as a template and then quickly get started working with that type of synthesizer. So if you think about all the different synthesizers out there, you can create your own combinations that match those and make use of the high quality effects and oscillators that are contained within Falcon. So then here you can just come to your user templates and then access the particular type of synth that you've created and get started right away. But for our purposes for this tutorial, we're going to start with the synth template, and we'll go ahead and load that up. We can see that a key group has been created, and this is spread across our entire range of our keyboard. So I can play up at the top, and we can hear that being played back. Now if I come to the left edge, then we have these double arrows, and I can left click hold and pull this in. I can come to the right and pull this in, and now this key group 1, this section is the only area where that oscillator is going to be triggered. If I come here outside of that area, we do not have any sound. Let's go ahead and click on the disclosure arrow for our oscillators so we can see what this analog oscillator looks like. Here's our sine that we're hearing. We can also determine the velocity that's going to trigger that synth oscillator there. So let's come to the bottom, pull this up, and then now as we play up higher on the keys, that's going to be a lower velocity, so that's not being triggered. As we play lower on the key, that's going to trigger our higher velocities. So we'll come to this eye, which we saw a moment ago, highlight played key groups. So I'll click on that, and now you'll see as I play lower, you'll see a little horizontal line. You can barely see it. Let's play lower on the key. So take note there. So that's just going to show where you're playing at. So this triggers, again, higher velocities at the tip of our keys and lower velocities when we play this up higher. So we will go ahead and we can right click on this, and we have some options for extending this key group. So we can extend left, for instance, we can extend right, we can extend bottom, and then pull this back out. But just know that you have a lot of options for managing your key groups. You can have multiple key groups that are assigned to different oscillators in here as well. And you can use this, move key group to front or to back if you do have multiple key groups within here. So there's just a ton of different options for managing our key groups, more than we can cover in this introductory video, but just know that you can access this by right-clicking on your key group. So this oscillator that we have here is assigned to this key group 1, and within Falcon our sound starts from the bottom, from our key group, and then makes its way up through our layers and to our program, and then to our main out. And if I come down to our modulation down at the bottom, let's click on the arrow there. Here's our amp envelope for this analog oscillator. Let's change again to our saw. So we can adjust our attack, decay, sustain, and release. And something else to be mindful of is within these sections, we will, on some of these different devices, have presets that are available to us. So for this amp envelope, we can come here where it says default, and we can change this to be analog bell. This would be more appropriate for, say, the sine. We can then come here again, choose keys. We could also use these left and right arrows to navigate. Let's come to the next one. Here's our long pad. Let's come back to our saw. And we'll click the right arrow again, then we've got popcorn. Let's try that with our sine. Okay, so that sounds like popcorn, right? Then we have extra punch. Now, this same preset menu is available for our analog oscillator. So if we come to where it says default, click on this, we have some presets that are already put together for us for this analog oscillator. Basic saw, I can use the right arrow. Kazoo. So if you really want to learn how to use these oscillators, this can be one way, going through the presets. Take note of the parameters and their adjustments and see how they made the adjustments to get the sound that you're selecting here. Let's right click again. Okay, now we have a ton of different oscillators within Falcon. So the way that we can access those is this analog oscillator just loads when we create that synth template, but we can left click and hold to access that menu, or we can right click on that tab. Now we have two different sections. We have sampling at the top. The sampling oscillators are going to be listed in alphabetical order. So we have grains, which is new in 2026. We have Urcam granular, variety of different sample oscillators. This is our basic sample. Now the bottom section is going to be for our synthesis. So we have our 808 bass drum, which is also new in 2026. We have additive, an additive oscillator. And again, let's go ahead and collapse our mapping section. We have the same preset menu for each oscillator. So if you want to experiment with these again, let's right click. Let's right click on our tab here. Now we've got analog stack, which is just a stack of oscillators here. And one of my favorite presets in here is this pad sus2. Let's take up the release, our attack. And let's come up to our layer section. And we'll come to the effects. Let's add a bit of delay on here. And I'm going to come to my favorite one here, the dark little room. Let's add some reverb to this. And I'm going to again come to the IR, the I reverb. And we'll come to the hardware. Let's come to the L48 plate. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm jumping the gun here. We're going to clear out these effects from our layer section. So we can do that by clicking on the X like so. Let's go ahead and collapse that layers section here. And we'll continue on taking a brief look at some of these other oscillators. I mean, we could spend tons of hours just looking at these different oscillators. So we've got noise oscillator with different modes there. Let's right click again. We've got wavetable. So once we select that, we can then come to this drop-down menu here. We've got a section for single and multi. So when we use the single, we're just going to be loading a single wave cycle within here. So let's come to the string. And then we have our multis down at the bottom. Let's come to our saw PM and load that up. And we can see which cycle we're playing on this table here. And we can make our way through the table with the wave index. Now, if we'd like to modulate this, we can right click on it. And we'll come down to the key group and add a new LFO. I'm going to take this off of bipolar. We have our bipolar control there. Now we can navigate through the tables by using the left and right arrows. Adjust our frequency for that modulation here. Its depth. Now for our wavetable oscillator, we can take the voices up. We can just hover and use the mouse wheel if you have one. Put that in stereo. Take the stereo spread up, detune. We also have some FN modulation that we can click to enable. All sorts of fun to be had. Let's go ahead and turn that off. So a bunch of different options here for really tweaking your sound and getting something super cool. Let's come back again and right click on this tab here. Now, a new addition that we have for our oscillators in 2026 is the Super Saw. And of course, again, we can come to the presets section here. We can take our oscillators up. I'm just going to hover and use my mouse wheel. Detune. Super cool. Now, what about for sampling? We can right click again, and as I mentioned, we have the top section, which is going to be for our samplators. Sample oscillators. I'll get it together here. Now, this sample is our basic one, so if I go ahead and choose that, then we can see that this loads up. It looks pretty basic. We'll come to our places, and we'll come to that sample library that I've set up. Let's come to the movie samples. Then I can double click to load that up, or I could just left click, hold, and drag that. Now this is playing back.
I feel like you got two heads.
Because the speaker icon is on, I'll click on the stop button. So when you have the speaker icon highlighted, anything that you click once on is going to be auditioned. You can also click on the play to start that. You've got level control for that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger this. Now, if I want to see the route that this sample has been loaded onto, I can come to the mapping. Let's go ahead and show that. And we can see here, this red key, which is C3, is where our original sample is going to be located. And we can see that the route is set to C3, and we can see the range that it's set for and the velocity range that it's set for. We have level adjustments, panning. So let's go ahead. We can see where I'm triggering here.
I must feel like you got two heads, so everybody looks at you around here, huh?
Okay, now we can adjust the size of this. Let's go ahead and collapse this out for a second here. If I hover at the bottom, then I can adjust the size like so. If I come to the edge, we can adjust the start position here. So now
I must feel like you got two heads, so everybody looks at you around here, huh?
We can adjust the end by hovering at the edge there, and that's our end marker like so. Now with this loaded, let's go ahead and switch the sample type. We'll try out the new grains. We can change the position here. We can adjust our grain size. Voices.
Everybody looks at you. It's so close. No memories. And all their memories think from places they even know they. And all their memories. Places they know they think. From places they know they think from. And all their memories. And all their memories. You ever think of places they know they come from? You say that? So close. Listen so close. All their memories.
Let's actually come up to our layers again. And let's actually try the new bloom, which is another item that's been added, a new reverb that's been added in version 2026. Let's come to the large and endless. Now, as with what we've seen earlier, we have a preset section here. So once we've loaded that, chose our preset, we can then make use of these controls here. I'll just use the right arrow. Let's try some of these. The shimmer. Now, while we're here, I just want to show some of these other cool effects that we have here. Let's come to our diffuse delay. We'll start off with the default and we'll power off our bloom. Now we can move these. If I left click and hold and drag that, then we can set our bloom to come after our diffuse delay. And I'm actually going to power off our bloom for now. So in order to see the diffuse delay, we click once on its tab. Again, we have a preset menu. I'll click on the right arrow. Beautiful. Now let's take a look at another effect here. We can add some chorus. Now within the equalizer section, we have this cool convolver that I like, and we can actually choose from these different devices, speakers, and special effects. So let's check this out real quick. We'll come with the toy one. So tons of fun to be had making use of the different processors and effects within Falcon. I could just totally get lost in this. You can transform a sound into something you couldn't even imagine just tweaking around with these different effects that are available. But let's go ahead and we'll just power these off for the moment, and we'll collapse that layer section, and we'll right click on our grains. We've got an FM oscillator, and of course this also has its own presets. So just basically any oscillator that you could dream of, you have access to. We've even got organ. Okay, so it's easy to really get lost in this. Now, for our oscillator section, we can actually have more than one oscillator. So if we'd like to add another, we can click on the plus and say we wanted to have a sample that plays along with our organ. Well, they can both play back at the same time. Let's go ahead and X to close that sample oscillator out. Now also, if we come to our right side, our panel on the right hand side, we have this oscillator tab. So if I click on this, this is yet another way that we can go about loading our oscillators. So right here we have our sampling category. If I expand that out, then we can see all of the different sample oscillators that we saw when we right click. And then we also have our synthesis. So if I wanted to add, say, a texture oscillator, I can left click hold and drag that over and add that like so. And this is going to function the same for our effects as well. So if you don't like the idea of, let's come to our layer section, clicking on the plus and then coming through the menus here, you can, let's click on the effects tab, and then we can see everything grouped by category. So if I wanted to add some sort of drive or distortion, we can expand that out. Here we've got a wave shaper, and we can just left click hold and drag that. Go through our presets. Probably not the best oscillators to use for this particular processor, but you get the idea. You can click on the plus to add your effects. If you want to replace an effect, you can right click on its tab and then choose something different, and then that's going to replace what's currently there. Or we can come over to our tabs and drag and drop to where we'd like to add it to. Now let's actually switch out these oscillators, and I'm going to put a wavetable back in here, and let's go ahead and add modulation to our wave index just so we can see what that's going to look like if you decide to use the browser section over here. So for our last tab, this is going to be our modulations. So here we have LFO. If I were to left click, hold, and drag that onto our wave index, that's another way that we can add that. Now we can see that that tab is open for our LFO. Let's take our input gain down for our wave shaper, and let's left click, hold, and drag that to be in the front. Okay, now one thing to note about the modulation, if you want to manage your modulations, we see we have these purple and violet circles that are surrounding these parameters. So basically, if I were to click on this pitch, then we can see that down below our modulation section updates to show, oh well, pitch pin is applied to this. If we were to come to our wave index and click here, then we can see this is our LFO that's been assigned to that. If we come to our gain within the key groups, then that's going to open or take us to our amp envelope, which is assigned to the key group gain. So this is a quick way to access and manage the parameters for any modulators that you've added to your particular patch. And we've got a ton of different modulators that we can make use of: attack, hold, decay, analog, ADSR. Clicking on this, we can expand out. We see those presets that we saw earlier when we click down below here. These are basically the same, just another way to access those depending on what you prefer. We've got multi-envelopes, parametric LFO, step envelopes. So the options are endless. Now to finish up, we'll just take a quick look at the tree view here, just to know this can help you manage your patches, especially if you're doing something that's very complex. If you're doing something simple with one or two oscillators, a filter, and a couple of effects, then you may not need to navigate to this section. But just know that it is available to help you manage what you're working on. So here we have our part. This is part 1. If we come here, we can see this is our new program. Coming back to the tree view, we can see that here, and that is expanded out. We have one layer within this particular program. If I click on that disclosure arrow, then we can see our wave shaper. We can manage whether it's active or not from here. We can see our convolver. We can click once to show or to power it on and off. We can see that that is now powered on. There's our bloom, reverb. This is our key group. We can expand that out. Then we can see our wavetable oscillator is here. We can mute or solo this particular layer and mute and solo our part. And then down at the very bottom, we have an inspector. So if we have our wavetable selected, then we can manage its parameters from within this window here. And let's just scroll back up to the top. And then we have our list view where we can do some further management of what we're working on here. And we can do things like clicking on the plus to add a second layer. And then on the second layer, we can see that this is totally empty. If I come to the mapping and expand that out, we can see we don't even have a key group here. But if I were to come down to this key group section, click on the plus, and now we add a key group, which has automatically loaded up our basic analog oscillator. Let's click on the tree tab, and now we can see we have layer 1 and layer 2. Let's expand out layer 2. Key group 1, here's our analog oscillator, and then here's our wavetable, so we can navigate between our layers and oscillators like so. Let's collapse our mapping section. Okay, so it could be easy to continue to go on with this tutorial, but I feel like it's already getting longer than I had intended. And basically, I'm hoping that what I have shown here is enough to get beginners started and help to better understand how you can navigate. I'll put up some more in-depth tutorials on navigation, understanding the hierarchy and structure, and working with modulation, effects, and a more detailed look at the different sections and parameters available. Okay, so we'll wrap up here, guys. I hope that you got at least something, a little bit something useful out of this. If you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment below. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.